welcome back to I Bought a Microphone. Hope you guys are doing well. I apologize, I don't have a movie review for you like I promised. I honestly haven't watched the movie yet. There's a finite number of hours in the day, and I've had Preacher to catch up on, and I don't know, I lost some time. So, I will get on that, and we'll do it. We'll do it, I promise. But in the meantime, there's other things that we can talk about. Main things been on my mind recently have been one of the things that I like. I like a lot of things, but there's one thing that I like a lot, and that is RPGs, role-playing games. Specifically, tabletop role-playing games. I've been thinking about them a lot lately. I haven't played one in a while. I had a semi-regular crew in Tucson I played with that I was going to try to do remotely, but we haven't. No one's been able to really get it together recently, and I've been looking around to see what I can find here in Phoenix to do. Maybe there's something at a game shop or something I can hop in on, because I'm getting the itch, man. Gotta roll some dice. Gotta play some games. And I mean, I played board games, but yeah, RPGs are a whole different animal. If any of you are familiar with them, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who live in Harmontown, which I've talked about before, or at least tangentially familiar to role-playing games, though, I mean, I usually drink a drink or two while I'm playing just to loosen me up, but I'm not usually blackout drunk when I do it, and those guys, yeah, it's crazy. Though from what I understand, they don't really do that anymore. I don't know. I'm still catching up. I'm in the 2015s. For some reason, I have decided to go all the way through just because I like Dan Harmon so much. And Jeff B. Davis. I'm a big fan. But we're not talking about podcasts today. Even though this is a podcast, we're not talking about podcasts. We're talking about RPGs. I have a couple of favorites, obviously. Probably my number one is Shadowrun. And that, if you're not familiar with it, is actually a pretty cool idea. Shocking that it's not been co-opted for a movie or something. If you've seen Bright on Netflix, sort of like that, but add futuristic cyberware stuff. Like, so it's a quasi futuristic universe where technology has advanced to a point where we can replace entire limbs with cybernetic components that augment strength or hide weapons, or simply just replace broken limbs that no longer function or have been lost in accidents. So, they don't have to be cybernetically enhanced, but we have that option. We can replace eyeballs with cybernetic eyes that have enhanced vision and thermal graphics and, low light enhancements and flare compensation and all sorts of crazy stuff. There is something called the Matrix, which is basically the internet that coats the entire world. And literally, I mean, I guess not the entire world, but the reason I say coats is it's not just on computers. It's like it is today. It's on phones. It's in buildings. It's on Wi-Fi. It spreads out everywhere. So you have what's called augmented reality, where you can actually, through your cyber eyes or through goggles or Google Glass or whatever it is you happen to be using to interface with the augmented world around you, you can get information. If you have a facial recognition programming program running. Your glasses will tell you, will analyze people's faces as you look at them and tell you if they have a criminal record or not. And certain businesses that you walk by will flash you with adverts on sales that they have. And, you know, if you have a call on your phone, it will come up bleep on there, and you can answer it, and you can see the person's face in your peripheral vision, or whatever, however you want to handle that. And it's accessible everywhere that you're on the grid. There are places that don't have grids. In the modern world, there are dead spots. So you're totally surrounded by all this advanced technology. But there's another aspect to the world that's even crazier than all of that. Like, that alone would be crazy. And then there's another side of it, which the world has awakened, quote unquote, which means that there have been magic forces in the world that have been lying dormant for centuries. Right now, the century that you and I are living in, there are magical forces, there are dragons, and there are elves, and there is magic lying buried underneath the earth, just waiting to be awakened. And in the universe that this is set in, the 2070s, magic has been awakened. So there are different races of people, they call them, just, for sake of ease, I guess. So, some children are born, short and stocky and grow beards at very young ages. Those are dwarfs. Some people are born, with pointy ears and very beautiful lithe features and grow taller than others, and those are elves. Then there are other people who go through the process of goblinization. Now, you don't know if you're an orc or a troll until you hit puberty, usually around 12, 13, 14. But in that period of time, you go through a really horrific change as your body morphs and you grow tusks, and as a troll, you actually grow horns as well and increase your size about twice as big as you were before. Orcs not quite as big, but they are about, let's say, 50% bigger than they would normally be as humans, and they have tusks and, large foreheads, and the trolls have thick, scaly hides. And, of course, there's your purebred, run-of-the-mill humans that are still running around out there. But there's also dragons and other fantastic beasts that roam the countryside. There's Sasquatches that are actually semi-sentient, and it's crazy. It's crazy, and it's got a really cool, interesting backstory, I think. So, you know how we treat Native Americans really great in this country. Well, in this fictional universe, Native Americans not really treated so well. They don't really appreciate it. So they create, they basically, there's a guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he unites a lot of the tribes together, and they basically threaten the United States of America and say, things are going to change around here, or you guys are going to get all messed up. And of course, nobody listens to him because they don't believe in him. And I believe there's ridiculous things like signs of white buffaloes being born and whatnot. And they have what's called the Great Ghost Dance, where a bunch of the Native American tribesmen get together and they perform a ritual. And I'm assuming it involves dancing of some kind. And volcanoes all over the U.S. that were thought to be dormant erupt and just take out, large chunks of the population, just as proof of their power. And this is the moment, where people really realize there's been other signs, dragons appearing and whatnot, but this is when people really realize that magic is back and here to stay. We gotta take this shit seriously. And through a protracted period of time, there's a war, there's a ceasefire, there's a treaty, and basically the combined area of Canada and America is divided up into several different territories. Large portions of land are given to a number of tribal councils, 6 or 7 or 8, I can't remember exactly. The northeastern parts of North America become the UCAS, the United Canadian American States. The southern from like Florida to parts of Texas become the CAS, the Confederated American States. The city of Denver is set up kind of like East Berlin in the Cold War. It's a city that's controlled by a bunch of different representing bodies, and it's kind of a treaty area. Seattle, for some reason, is a territoriality of the UCAS, which is retained. And that's where the majority of Shadowrun takes place. Seattle is a big area. California is a free state. It's basically run by a bunch of crazy warlords and movie producers, and yeah, it's insane. And then there's a small area in the upper northwest, somewhere on the border of California and Oregon, called, it's spelled Tanger, but it's pronounced Shinar, something like that. Basically, it's a magical. It's Rivendell, or Galadriel's forest. It's a magical world of the elves. Yeah, where supposedly they're ruled over by a dragon, and there's no high technology or any of that stuff. It's all just a magical forest. And anyway, that's the background there. That's Shadowrun. I've had a lot of fun with that game, because basically a Shadowrunner. So in this magical dystopian future, corporations have gotten extra legal status. Certain mega corporations are able to, function outside of the normal boundaries of, they get the same classification, same, world recognition as governments, basically. So they can do what they want, when they want, however they want to. But the thing is, there are other mega corporations that may have similar or opposed interests with two, such large, well-financed forces clashing with each other can often cause, upscale large conflicts like wars and whatnot, and that's bad for business. So it's become commonplace to hire Shadowrunners, which are highly elite, trained operatives that run in the quote-unquote shadows and perform extra-legal operations. And, it's nice to live in a gray world. Like D&D and another favorite game of mine, Pathfinder, you have your alignments. You have to lock yourself in. I'm lawful good. I believe in the law and I stand for it. Regardless of who it may or may not hurt, it's the law. And we must abide by it. And you got chaotic evil where I just want to kill everything. Or maybe I don't. I just want to torture things today. Yeah, anyway, and true neutral, boring. Anyway, So Shadowrun lets you live in the somewhat real world. I mean, obviously not the real world, but in a gray world. Where there's good and there's bad. It's it's a sliding scale. You choose your own morality, and your morality can change depending on the situation. And you don't have to be. You can be just as bad or as good as you want to. I mean, you can make a character that's forced into the shadows and is actually a good guy who's just trying to make the best of a bad situation. Or you can be the character I usually choose is somebody who believed in the corporate system and has since been betrayed by it and is now fallen from grace and is discovering just how shitty life without a mega corporation supporting you can be. And maybe he's not the nicest guy in the world, and maybe he doesn't necessarily care how you fare from day to day, as long as your being okay doesn't fuck with me being okay. And, things like that. So it's not necessarily malicious intent, so to speak. For example, one of the favorite characters I ever created was that guy named Mr. Smith. Well, that was his alias. That's his street name, Mr. Smith. His real name was Wick Greenbridge, which he never told anybody because it's a ridiculous name and he was totally embarrassed by it. And I chose that specifically. And Mr. Smith was kind of an upper crusty dude, like not the top 1%. He was probably in like the top 75%. So there was always somebody above him looking down on him, but he always had people to look down on, sort of a thing. And he really wanted to be great. He wanted to exceed, he wanted to excel, so he got in well with one of the biggest corporations in Shadowrun's world, Ares, who is essentially if Iron Man didn't become Iron Man, like if he had kept with Stark Industries and if Obadiah had kept them going upwards, they're like one of the biggest weapons manufacturers, and they run security for the entire city of Seattle. Their police is all privatized. There's no government sanctioned law enforcement. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's Knight Errant runs the security for Seattle. They're the police force, quote unquote. But Ares has their own private security force, and that's where Mr. Smith got his start. He was, up and coming mid-level security operative, and basically got betrayed by somebody who he worked for, who just saw him as another peg that they could step on to climb higher. And so he took all of his cybernetic enhancements and all of his training, and he put it for use for himself. And he put together a group of Shadowrunners. He's what was called the face of the group, where he's the the smiley, happy-go-lucky guy that's always willing to negotiate for a higher price and always looking for the new opportunity and trying to put a positive spin on everything, as long as that positive spin spins in our group's direction. But he had a dark side too. He had a lot of serious combat training, and he couldn't really take a punch to save his life, but he could fucking dish out some serious damage. He was a trained sniper. He was trained with firearms because he was part of Ares security. So he wasn't to be trifled with. And also, his morality was he's not a Christian. He's not a do unto others as they do unto you. He's more of a do to them before they can do unto you type of a guy. Yeah, he was really fun to play, and he had a really expensive penthouse and a really expensive car. It was all appearance, It wasn't necessarily he was, living paycheck to paycheck, job to job, but he had the fancy apartment and he had the fancy car, and that's, he's just looking for that next paycheck so he can keep living the high life that he thinks he deserves. Yeah, oh, good times. Good times with Shadowrun. So then there's another game that I also like a lot called Pathfinder, and that's D&D. If you've at all familiar with role-playing games at all, you've heard of Dungeons and Dragons, and Pathfinder is just kind of a different version of that. So some of the people who worked on some of the later versions of D&D took their ideas and made a system called Pathfinder, and that's it's a hybrid D&D. It takes some of the old school rules and some of the new school rules. It's I really like it a lot. I found a lot of fun with it. Not that D&D is bad. It's just I find Pathfinder's a little more streamlined, I guess I could say. Though I haven't played any of the new editions. I think D&D is up to like fifth edition now. So Pathfinder is basically, if you are familiar with D&D and you've never really played it, it's like D&D 3.5, but it's a little more fleshed out. There's a little more detail that they put into it. It's got a really interesting combat system. I think it's not too overburdened with rules, but it has enough into it that lets you get creative with it. A lot of times I found with, especially systems like D&D, you're kind of locked in to the system. There's not a lot of room for creativity, and if you want to get creative, then it's not necessarily balanced properly. But in Pathfinder, they give you kind of a good outline for any kind of wacky stuff that you might want to do with, charging opponents or grappling opponents or, diving off of rails with ropes in your mouth or knives in your mouth holding onto ropes. I don't put the rope in your mouth. Your teeth will just break out and no good will come of that. Something that's kind of, I don't know if it's unique to Pathfinder or not, because I don't know a lot about a lot of other role-playing systems, but I like the attack of opportunity system. It kind of penalizes you for being flighty. Oh, I want to attack this guy. Oh, I want to attack this guy. Oh, I want to attack this. No, that's not. In real combat, you turn your back to somebody that you're fighting, and they get a chance to stab you in the back because you're no longer paying attention to them. So that's the attack of opportunity is kind of great because you can step into what's called a threatened square and face off against whoever you want. But if you step out of that square, if you leave yourself vulnerable doing that, then you're going to take a penalty. So you got to kind of plan your actions carefully. Unless you're, a ranged character, in which case you don't really have to worry about that as much. I played a character I liked a lot called Snowy Locks, who was a half-elf barbarian with white hair. He is probably one of the favorite characters I've ever created ever. He was a superhero, essentially. So his backstory was His father was an elf from a very aristocratic merchant family, and he fucking hated it. So he left that and ran off into the woods like a dirty hippie and became a druid. Nature worshiper, could perform nature magic, things like that. One day in his woods, a wagon comes barreling through and crashes into a tree, and it's got this young woman in it who is the daughter of a lord who basically he learns, he sees her, he instantly falls in love with her, blah blah blah, fairy tale. Um, you gotta have, cliches are cliches for a reason. They work, but also they help drive a story. It's all backstory at this point. He falls in love with her, and she tells him that she's this daughter of this wealthy lord who's in debt to this other lord who wants to kidnap her for ransom, and he saves her. He takes her deep into the woods and he hides her, and the her father sends these evil mercenaries that are in his employ to try and find her, and he uses his druidic powers to use the power of the forest to turn them away. And they fall in love, and they live in the forest for a number of years. They have a child, and that child is born with snow white hair, and they call him Snowy Locks. And they're both become really powerful druids and are one with the forest. And he is just a dumb kid who has no aptitude for magic, but it turns out he's really, really strong. He can climb up trees in his bare hands, and he can lift large rocks, and he can do all of that stuff. So they, doting parents that they are, they encourage him in his physical pursuits, and they stop trying to teach him magic. But he learns a lot, about the forest. He's got a lot of knowledge of the forest, and he learns how to listen to the sounds of the forest and things like that. One day, a group of orcs come marauding through the forest, tearing it down. His parents are unable to stop them. They tell him to hide, and then they try to fight off the orcs themselves, and they get killed while he watches. You're right. I know you're thinking it, and you're right. Snowy Locks is basically Batman. So now comes the part where he learns about rage. This is where he becomes a barbarian. So he's already strong. He's already, well versed in leaping through the forest and fighting off predators. And now he knows what the power comes from the true anger within him. And he hunts down the orcs that killed his parents. He slays them one by one. He kills the leader of the orcs and claims his greatsword for his own. And from that day forward, he becomes Snowy Locks, the defender of the forest. And he spends a number of years running through the forest, befriending animals and making sure that nobody tries to hurt the forest, until some evil soldiers come along and start chopping down the forest for firewood, and blah blah blah. Big epic story begins. And that's that's where everything that I told you was all the stuff that I wrote before I started playing the character. Well, some of it I wrote before, some of it I wrote later. But basically, I had this idea for this character. And as it was coming to me, I'm like... And again, I wasn't thinking Batman when I made him. I was just thinking this would be a cool idea for a character. And then later I was like, holy shit, this is Batman. Though, similar backstory, kind of opposite lesson that he learned. It's like So I guess maybe he's more like the Punisher, because but no, I don't know. He's kind of like a combination, I suppose, because he's not hesitant about killing people at all. He has absolutely no compunctions about slicing people to shit with his giant greatsword. He's got no objections to that, but he doesn't hurt nice people. He only hurts people that threaten other people or people that he perceives as bad. This is the alignment system, that Pathfinder uses that came over from D&D. He is what's called chaotic good, which is he does not worry about laws or local customs. He's got his own idea of what he thinks good is. And if you are opposed to that, whether you are acting lawfully or not, if you are opposed to what he believes is good, then he will oppose you and will have no hesitation to chop your fucking head off or, bisect you down the middle or whatever it takes. The dude did some nasty damage by the time he got up to 5th level. I think I did, the most I did was, I got a critical hit, which ended up being 40 something damage. Like, it was really, he was a dirty, dirty man. Ugh. And literally dirty, though, too. I had a quirk about him where he lived in the forest, for so long. He was one of the forest creatures, so he never bathed. So he didn't necessarily smell bad. He kind of smelled earthy because he was just covered in layers and layers of dirt. And every time he ended up having to bathe, he felt, unclean and unnatural. Every time he saw his pink skin underneath the layers of dirt, and he was terrified. But yeah, he was a lot of fun with that guy. At one time, there were these two groups of people that were starting a war that was kind of in the background. We were traveling from one place to another, and there were these different factions that were vying over control. I had absolutely no stake in either one of those games. And something I learned from my mother was that, this is Snowy Locks talking. Something that Snowy Locks learned from his mother was that, aristocracy and all of that shit, it was all a facade. It was all bullshit. There was no good to be had in any of that. So, there's these two factions that are, kind of fighting each other, vying for, one of them are loyal to the crown, the others are not loyal, and we're in this kind of neutral city where a group of these people are meeting up, and, I'm like, I don't like either one of these people. It's probably better if they all just kind of die and sort that shit out, so I start a riot. Basically hide behind a group of the royalists and throw a rock and sneak around to the other side and do the same thing. And I already incited kind of tensions earlier where I was in a tavern and I sent a plate of shit over to a group of soldiers that were on the royalist side and told them that it was from the other guys. And so, Snowy Locks was not opposed to a little social disorder, a little public disobedience, a little shaking things up. But at the end of the day, if there was a family and some children, a mother who was abandoned by her father, if they were in trouble, he would do whatever the hell it took to make sure that they were safe. Give them all the gold in his pockets if he had to. Though he usually didn't do that. Like, he didn't really have, growing up in a forest, he didn't really have a concept of charity. Though he was familiar with the concept of tipping, which was something that his father mentioned to him. So he had a weird quirk where anyone who ever helped him with anything, even if it's not a a profession that customarily gives tips or gets tips, he would tip them a gold coin just because that's what he thought was socially acceptable. He had no real social skills. Always positive, real real upbeat guy. I enjoyed that character so much. I really enjoy role playing games, and I'd like to get back into them. So I'm going to work on that. And I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble about these things that I love so much. I know it's kind of silly to listen to a guy ramble on and on for minutes about tens of minutes about things that never happened. But, I think, yeah, this is going to be a two-parter. I'm going to come back to this. There's more I have to say on this subject, but I'm already gone on for quite some time, and even after I edit this down, it's going to be a lot less. So, okay, so this is Things I Like Part 2A, Shadowrun, and Pathfinder. And I've got more to say on this subject later. But for now, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will have movie reviews for you soon. As always, I love you guys, and take care of yourselves. Talk to you soon.